Well, first of all, thank you for being here early in the morning, and I'd like to welcome our panel. Maybe the easiest way is if you introduce yourselves, tell us where you're working out of, where you're operating out of, sort of what your business or products are, and also whether it'd be useful to know whether sort of you're in operation or whether you're sort of in the development stage as well. Chetan, do you want to start?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chetan Dharmadhikari. I work for Mercury Marine. We are the largest recreational marine suppliers, engine and boat manufacturers. In business for last 70, 80 years now. I particularly manage all the electrification programs at Mercury and looking at all these new chemistries as well as existing chemistries. So thank you for having me here.
Emilie.
Good morning, I'm Emilie Bodoin. I'm the founder and CEO of Pure Lithium, and we make lithium metal electrodes from brine sources and put them in a vanadium battery. We're a Boston-based company, and we're only 3 years old, so we're still in development stage, and we're scaling our technology right now.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Adrian Tylem. I head business development globally for Blue Solutions. We're part of a very large French group, family-owned, in existence for 200 years, and we specialize in solid-state batteries, which we have been manufacturing for a couple of decades, and we'll talk more about deployments and all that.
Thank you. So, sort of just to set the scene, so most of the batteries we're currently using are obviously LCO for consumer electronics, and then LFP and NCM for sort of EVs and energy storage systems. Chetan, maybe you, as sort of the consumer on the panel, maybe you could let us know what you use and sort of what you're using them for.
Sure. Last 2 days, we heard about the automotive perspective. Today, I will try to give some marine and off-road vehicle perspective. When it comes to marine, one of the biggest, most important parameter is the energy density. And if you look at where gasoline is close to 2,000 watt-hour per kg. With LFP, we are at 150, 160 maybe, and NMC maybe 180. So there's a huge gap from where we would like to be, where customers are, and where we are. But what we are looking at is using either LFP or NMC, and then redesigning the applications, redesigning the boards to work with these chemistries. So the way I see it is LFP, obviously very stable, very cost effective, and they play a really good role when it comes to, we want to go long distance, but don't want to go high speeds. LFP is excellent solution. When we want to go higher speeds, not same as gasoline, we look at NMC, gives some moderate speeds, but then again, looking at future, there's a lot more opportunity. If you want to drive a boat at 70, 80 miles per hour, you're consuming 5-7 times what a typical car would consume. So there's a lot of growth opportunities.
Okay, thank you. So you're excited about the future with sort of what sort of some of the solid-state batteries
yes,
might have to offer? Yes,
solid-state and all other chemistries.
Yeah, excellent. Emilie, Adrian, as sort of battery technology providers, how long do you see the sort of the current sort of incumbent batteries being around? Are we sort of going to see some sort of, when are we going to see this sort of disruption from sort of solid-state batteries, do you think?
Yeah. Would you like to go first?
Well, you're the one who's closer to production, so
yes.
I'm going to let you.
Yeah, so we're kind of unique in that we've been making solid-state batteries for almost 2 decades. People say solid-state is going to be the future, but we're a company that doesn't advertise much what we do. So in 2011, we deployed them in 5,000 Renault cars, and then after that, we deployed them in electric buses. If you go to the Olympics next month, you will see many in the city of Paris powered by our batteries. The same with Daimler at their buses. So we see an evolutionary side to solid state. Those batteries that you see deployed today have a different chemistry. Around 2011, when we came with the product, a guy with the first name of Elon came to the market and said, you have to fast charge. So because of that, the consumer needs and expectations have been changing. So right now we're focusing on the 4th generation of these, and we're working with OEMs actually to have our next generation deployed probably towards the end of the decade. And just in closing, the expectation for solid state, according to market trends, at least for us, we're very measured, very conservative. We expect about 5% market penetration around 2030 and about maybe 8% at 2035. Those are the numbers that we're playing with.
Okay, so for the moment, the current sort of batteries sort of are here to stay, so but obviously new ones are coming along.
Yeah.
Emily?
Not for long.
Yeah, so I've given a talk before titled Next Generation Batteries, Where Are They, right? Because you read all these news releases and they're never there, and they're never there for a myriad of reasons. So we're in development right now, and we're building a dry room and a prototype line, because you don't make batteries by hand commercially, right? So you have to make them with automated equipment. So as soon as that is done, then I'm going to feel very comfortable about answering a timeline within a year or two of certainty. But right now, there are so many things that could delay. For example, getting enough power to our building in Boston. I really can't control Massachusetts power, right, for example. So there are a lot of things that are actually out of our control at this stage. Once we've ran a pilot for a year and made 3 amp hour cells, 1,000 of them, we also make our own lithium for them. So we're basically scaling 2 technologies at the same time. The good news is everyone knows how to make batteries. That's not that hard, right? But the actual lithium production, we have to scale that up simultaneously. So once we've done that and ran that for a year, then it's a much easier question to answer. Going forward, then it's 3 or 5, it's closer.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And as a sort of an intermediate next stage, do you see sort of LMFP coming in, Adrian? Or?
Well, my dear friend Vivis Kumar loves LMFP, right, in Nitrochem, and there are a lot of benefits. I just want to say something good about LFP in general. I know the energy density is lower than what you need, but when we delithiate it a little bit and make it with lithium metal, we can get 240 watt-hours a kilogram in a handmade cell, right? Pretty reliably, consistently. But again, we do delithiate a little bit. LFP is wonderful. It's just a total workhorse. It's a forgiving material. And obviously, the rate capability can be improved and needs to be improved for some consumers. Although I'm curious if you guys agree with me. I think that EV consumers are just a little bit greedy and unrealistic about the demands that they want. I mean, it can take you more than 5 minutes to get gas sometimes in a lot of situations, okay? So you're asking, for the world. And I remember Mark Fabruggi at the end of his tenure at GM said, we thought everybody had to go 500 miles. If you remember the DOE and George Crabtree saying 500 miles, blah, 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 blah. Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that. So, as we kind of realize that we're going to have to compromise and not let consumers unrealistic demands. I have an investor who won't buy an electric car unless somebody comes up with a motor noise in it, because people want to hear the motor. And I said, I give up. We're going to just make batteries for cell phones, because they're small, and then we're going to move into cars. You have to make the same size, you have to make the same battery anyway. So let's start with the small ones, get some revenue, and then try to get to the EV market.
So the density level on LFP, we're reaching a little bit higher than what you mentioned.
Yeah.
The OEMs, as we started to work with them in these joint development agreements, it taught us, at least me, that they're serving different consumers again, right? So they need something for the low end, medium end, and then performance cars. And because of that, whereas our previous generation of cells were LFP based, now we're working not only LFP, NMC, but LMFP as a compromise so that they can serve each segment of their customers well.
Okay.
Yeah, on the LMFP, the way I see LMFP is the solid state, as Adrian mentioned, it's coming, it's going to take some time to come. LFP we already have, but there is still a gap that needs to be bridged from where we are and where we want to be. And I see LMFP as a very good solution. If we get the actual energy density at the pack level, 230, 240, we see a significant number of applications and customers moving to electrification who are kind of on the fence. Just to give example in the marine world, if you have an energy density of 150 to 180, we're talking about slow boats, which people enjoy, but with the drinks in hand. Well, that's a cocktail cruise. But as soon as we start talking about LMFP, now we talk about you need both hands on steering, you're driving at 40, 50 miles per hour, you need to watch, but you also get that thrill. So there's a lot of different applications, and I see LMFP has its own niche applications till you get mass commercialization of solid state or other chemistries.
I think that the issue is a marketing issue in my mind, where we as consumers are always, they are trying to portray us like having the dream car, the Lamborghini or whatever it may be, or a fast boat and all that, right? And the reality is that we don't do it, and if we do it, it's a very, very small percentage of the time, and yet we want that performance for 365 days of the year, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, but it's really good to know that 240 would do a lot for the marine industry.
Yeah.
That's really good. You know, I think we've avoided incremental changes, you know, with lithium metal, at least. Everyone's aiming for 400 hours a kilogram, and of course, you know, we are too, but at the same time, there really is a need for an intermediary step that would unlock a lot of consumers. I'm just reflecting on this, and it's really interesting that the cathode of the battery actually dictates applications. It's just interesting.
So, Adrian, Emilie, you have your own battery technologies, which we'll sort of come to in a minute. But Adrian, what are your thoughts on some of the other technologies like sort of sodium ion, lithium sulfur, and sort of lithium air? We hear a lot about sort of sodium ion. What do you see sort of the future of that, of sodium ion, and what about the other batteries?
Yeah, so I'm going to let Emilie respond to that. My view in general is the market is huge, and there will be, even now and in the future, different chemistries for all kinds of applications. With regards to the lithium sulfur, the sodium ions, and so forth, it seems to me, and I'm not an expert, that there are maybe still another 10 years behind, like where we were, you know, a few years ago, but I'm not sure how you see it.
I have very strong feelings about this one. Lithium sulfur is where companies go basically to die. Sulfur is not conductive. You have to coat it. It's free, and that's a nice thing, but there's a problem with it, and it's called a polysulfide shuttle. You get this redox looping, and you can't stop it. And if someone could stop it, they could probably win a Nobel Prize, but the problem is nobody has been able to solve the polysulfide shuttle problem, period. So until that happens, they're plagued with very bad self-discharge. Oxis Energy used to have to keep them in a freezer to stop them from discharging. And I had a lot of faith in Oxis, because lithium sulfur battery company run by great people in England. And you know, they went bust after 12 years, and they probably got further ahead than anybody. Lithium air is my favorite one. So it's what really got me interested in batteries in 2011, because it was this magical thing that IBM was working on. Well, the air that we breathe, guess what, guys? It contains like 78% nitrogen in it. If you have an air electrode and you're mixing it with lithium, it's, you know, it's like the iron air battery, okay? It's just not a practical solution for today's universe, because the air that's going to come and cycle with that electrode is not pure oxygen that you use in a glove box. So anybody can make a lithium air battery cycle with pure oxygen in a glove box if they have a PhD and can build a coin cell. But in commercial applications, I don't think it will ever happen. And the problem is that, you know, when people think about lithium metal, they think, okay, lithium sulfur and lithium air, because that's what they've heard of. And then 10 years go by, and then new companies come up again trying. I haven't seen a lithium air company starting to try again. So that, at least that's, you know, maybe there's been some consensus in the industry that that one is just really not worth wasting investor dollars on right now.
To bring it to the solid state realm, it's really hard to commercialize and actually to manufacture at scale solid state cells. So we see a number of companies, you know, making lab cells and even growing and all that. But to do it consistently at the gigafactory level, there are all kinds of process issues that need to be dealt with. So, you know, that's something that is usually overlooked, and it takes a long time and a lot of effort.
Yeah. So Adrian, on that, so I mean, you are solid state, and I think, you know, as we said earlier on, sort of a lot of people sort of thought solid state was going to be further down the road, but obviously it's not, it's here. Can you give a bit more detail about, you know, exactly what is a solid state battery, and maybe sort of go through some of your sort of cathode and anode and electrolytes?
Yeah, so in our world, the solid state battery is one that has a solid electrolyte, okay? And in our case, the chemistry is a lithium metal anode. We manufacture everything from scratch, so the lithium metal ingot, we extrude it very thin, make it wide, at 50 meters per minute, very fast, with very low variability. And it's something actually I even starting to offer to some other competitor, let's call it, in the industry. So that's the anode, freestanding, no copper, lithium electrolyte, I'll come back in a minute, and then LFP, LMFP, or NMC. That's a sandwich, so to speak. In solid state batteries, typically you have ceramic electrolytes, oxide sulfides. Those require a lot of pressure to keep the interfacial contact for 800, 1,000 cycles. So imagine that you have to have 5 or 20 atmospheres to keep it, you know, for 10 years as the battery charges, discharges, or breathes. and then you need to add a lot of mechanical components, and that adds weight. That takes away from range, capacity, and so forth. So we are all in with a polymer electrolyte, which is more subtle and requires about 2 atmospheres, allowing basically to have more capacity and less cost in terms of the integration into a vehicle system.
Okay. And on the solid state thing, just maybe we can just go on it. You also hear sort of an anode-free sort of solid state. What is that?
The anode-free typically doesn't have the lithium anode as we use it, but it's plated with the first cycles and so forth, right? And there are a number of solutions that are looking at anode-free with ceramic materials. We see them as having challenges with that, scaling and all that. At least that's our view.
Okay.
We're trying to make it thinner and thinner, by the way, from the 3rd generation, where we had, say, 30 microns of an anode. Now we're going at less than 20 with really good results. And Emilie and her team, they have other solutions that actually are very interesting as well on the lithium metal anode.
Yeah. So just coming to you, Chetan, if you were to look at a solid state, sort of what sort of things would you need to sort of, to qualify? What sort of would you need to sort of feel happy with that? What sort of things would you go through, processes?
So first of all, any investment as an OEM, there are 2 aspects. One is of course, the cost of the product itself. But in terms of investment, each program is roughly 5 years long to qualify not just the battery, but the entire vehicle. So if as an OEM, if I'm investing $100 million and 5 years worth of time in any solution, the first and most important is the supply chain. Do we have a robust supply chain that will give a return on at least 5 years, ideally 10 years, 20 years lifespan? So once that is done, the second one is, does it meet all the regulations? Because as a battery manufacturer, they would have to go through some regulations. But when we put the product out in the market, it's the regulations, it's the reputation, everything is at stake. So nobody wants to have a product that does not meet any regulation. So second is qualification for the regulation. The third one is the environment that we live in is extremely harsh. For batteries particularly, we have corrosive environment. We use in salt water. If the boat goes in Florida and stays in Florida for the next 10 years, the battery has to live there. Similarly, it has to live in Canada. It has to live in every part of the world. So the third thing is that. And the fourth one is, what technology can I reduce the overall development time? That's the return on investment. How fast can I get to market? So I'm not worried about a competition coming up with similar or better technology, and we can win the market.
Okay, thank you. Emilie, as obviously over the last few days, we've seen quite a lot of you. You won one of the Volta Awards, and I think you came out first on the Shark Tank yesterday as well. Perhaps you could give us a bit more detail about your battery. It's not solid state, I understand, but how are your chemistries and your cathode and anodes? How do they differ from the batteries we've got at the moment, and also from sort of a solid state battery?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. I just want to clarify something that Adrian was commenting on with the ceramic solid oxides. They are flammable. There is absolutely no evidence that these oxides are safer than a liquid electrolyte. They are just as flammable. Adrian's polymer, not flammable. The oxide's flammable. My co-founder, Don Sadoway, invented a polymer membrane that industry started to try to adopt in the early 90s with a physicist named Ann Mays, and everyone's in the world's tried to use the thing, and it was great, but it's not conductive enough, and Blue Solutions has expanded. So when I started working with Don Sadoway in batteries, we started to use a solid polymer electrolyte, and we have a team of polymer scientists in our lab that work on it. We never really cared about having an all-solid battery. We cared about having a safe battery. So we looked at some lower voltage chemistries that could use less volatile electrolytes, et cetera, et cetera. And what we do now is we use a lithium metal electrode that we make differently than Blue Solutions. We use a brine and we electroplate it onto the copper. And if you ever look at a phase diagram of lithium and copper, you'll see that lithium, about 13% of it dissolves into the copper, and you get a very, very good chemical bond. So you cycle and cycle and cycle. When the anode-free thing, you're taking your NMC and a bare piece of copper, and you're plating it in the cell, and the first deposition isn't even uniform remotely across the piece of copper. It looks like a chocolate chip cookie. So you're off to a real bad start. So we have a really good adhesion to the battery, and then we pair it with this vanadium, a form of vanadium oxide. We're working with two incredibly similar forms of it, and we can't really predict which one we're going to use. One is a particular tunnel structure, one is a vanadium phosphate that Stan Whittingham invented. The beauty of vanadium is that when the battery has a thermal event, it won't release oxygen when it gets hot. So that safety profile of the cathode is hugely important to us, and it actually gives us a little bit of leeway in which electrolyte we use. So we don't have a solid battery. An all solid state battery, according to Steve Wilmot today in the Wall Street Journal, it's a solid that conducts ions across it. A lot of people think that you can have a solid electrolyte in there and then use a lithium ion electrolyte on the cathode side and still call it a solid state battery. That's not what we think up here at all. That's not the case. What we are concerned about is flammability. And it's very difficult to get your electrons through that cathode without some water, without some electrolyte there to help shuttle it out. So we're really working to develop a safe chemistry, but it's a lithium metal battery. And that's what I'm going to call it. I've heard so many different definitions. I talked to one banker who says a solid state battery is a solid lithium electrode. And I was like, oh, I actually hadn't heard that before. There just needs to kind of become a consensus, I think, because we're talking about very intricate chemistries. We're talking about the difference between LFP and MFP on the stage. You guys have any idea, like, we're in the weeds of chemistry here. So I think that the broad definitions need to be applied.
Right, thank you.
Sorry, tangent.
Just a follow-up really on that, Emily. Your sort of current focus, you've said, is on consumer electronics. What are the challenges sort of ramping that up and sort of getting that up into sort of mass into all our electronics and laptops and things like that?
Yes, well, we're starting with the consumer electronic market aim only because it's the most accessible. It's the lowest hanging fruit, right? Because it's a small battery. So in the path to making batteries, you have to make 3 amp hour cells before you make 100 amp hour cells, and you just absolutely have to do that. So on that path, we're going to find out a lot more. But if you think about the power requirements for an earbud, for example, it's a really nice, easy step, and you get support from a very, very large company. So as soon as we have more samples to send, we have partners right now that are looking at all of our data and all of our results, and not just the consumer electronics companies. We're working with electric vehicle companies like Mercedes and exchanging samples and data and information with them, and we have been for a while.
Okay, thank you. In terms of sort of batteries, the batteries you're talking about, sort of on a cost of sort of or sort of the amount of lithium per sort of kilowatt hour, how does that compare with sort of where we are at the moment, would say, sort of the higher NCM ones?
So our target, I cannot tell you what the cost of lithium metal anode is. And again, first of all, because we don't know today what it will be by 2028, 2029 when we have the product in vehicles. But our target is, in terms of all the performance and specifications, is performance is going to be 20 to 40% higher density than lithium ion in 28, 29, at a cost that is going to be 20 to 30% lower than what they will reach. Will it be $100 and then we'll be at 80? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But at least those are the targets, and we're moving in that direction.
Okay, Emily.
I think Adrian has a more informed answer than I can even give, just because he's further along, right? And he's further along and in production and made cells, and it's difficult, right, to predict the future and what everything's going to cost. But we set a cost target at Pure Lithium of under $50 a kilowatt hour on a material level. And we have to do it that way on a material level because that's the first input, right? So if we start with unobtainium, which is not on the periodic table actually, but vanadium is on the periodic table, you just can't do it. So we keep the materials really, really, really low, as low as we can. So we've done some models, with the cheapest LFP that we can buy, where we could be right around 40. Our largest cost input is our lithium salts for the electrode. So if we are buying lithium on the spot market, that's just not a real good plan, right, to control costs. This is exactly why we're working with these brine sources, because there is no market for brine of 500 to 1,000 ppms. Nobody cares. But for us, it's actually really, really lovely. So we, as we move forward and start to announce partnerships with other companies, and in a year, we'll have a really rigorous cost model and target that we'll be able to announce, but it's sort of more basic for us. Vanadium fluctuates. Vanadium's actually a commodity, whereas lithium isn't, right? So that price fluctuates, but we have room there too. It's not even terribly expensive.
Okay, thank you. We'll just answer some of these other questions if we can. So if we look at the top one there with the most votes, significant capex occurring in lithium batteries and anodes outside of China. With new technology changes, will this capex become obsolete in the near future? How do you see that?
It's interesting because I mentioned that we develop relationship with some OEMs. When they come and they visit our factories, their jaws literally drop. They say, first of all, I didn't know this existed, and then I cannot believe how small the footprint of your factory is, because in making solid-state batteries, the way we make it, there are many steps that you don't have to do in terms of when you compare it to the production of lithium-ion batteries. So we estimate that our factory, as compared to a lithium-ion factory, again, in the future, will be about 20 to 30% lower capex.
Okay, right.
And Adrian, I'm really glad you answered that, if I may interject, because there's so many benefits to making a lithium metal battery in a charged state. There's so many benefits, and the footprint is going to be substantially smaller. So you get all this, everyone in the world wants a dramatic change in battery, but every single investor says you have to drop into existing manufacturing, and there's a total inherent conflict with that, right? So like Adrian just said, his factory is smaller. It's a smaller footprint. There's a lot less stuff that you actually need. So these batteries can be retrofitted, right? The cathode is the cathode. The cathode lines don't really need to change that much from LFP to LNFP. That doesn't require $100 million in a capex change. So we're, I don't know, it's hard to answer that question, in a way, but at the same time, I think it's really excellent that you and I can demonstrate a smaller footprint. Yeah. I'd like the world to just think for a second about stopping gigafactory production in the US, because we can't even get the materials, and think about, new manufacturing methods. And once, we're more visibility and we make more public announcements, we're really going to push on the fact that this manufacturing process is so much easier and it's less capital intensive. So people shouldn't be afraid of putting new things online. They should be afraid of building gigafactories in this country when we're relying on graphite from China, and there's going to be a 25% tariff on it. That's what we should be worried about. And if China says, we don't want to give you graphite anymore in America because we just decide we really don't like you, well, we have 30 days of military batteries left. That's it. That's our stockpile. That's like what they tell you in Washington, D.C. So the military is like, oh, well, I mean, really, we're not thinking very, very logically, I think, as a whole about our batteries. So we have to stop being afraid of a new manufacturing process.
In there, you mentioned sort of a smaller footprint, so that's an interesting sort of lead into, how recyclable will your batteries, or are your batteries?
So our batteries are about this size, 2 feet, 1 foot, let's call it 100 layers, and you basically have anode, cathode, electrolyte in between. So, and part of it is lithium metal. How do you extract that, which is one of the highest values in the battery? So we created a proof of concept, actually, when we put in a chamber and we heat up the whole cell very slowly, and then the lithium metal melts underneath, like the Hershey Kisses, if you were to have a picture, and then we refine it, and the rest is black mass, right? And now we're looking into automating that. Actually, I was approaching Redwood Materials to see if we can do something together, because we have about 3 million cells already deployed, and we're starting after 10 years to see them starting to come back. So we're trying to be ahead of the curve, anticipating the volumes and trying to do that. And so it's very interesting. But that's how we do it, and it's already embedded in sort of like our system, so to speak.
But they're easier to recycle. Lithium metal batteries are intrinsically much easier to recycle because you can pull all of the lithium out. That is brilliant. That's really, really great. That's really, really great.
Okay. And we've only got a few seconds left. Adrian, do you want to answer that second one? No, sorry, the last one.
The last one, it says that there was a blue car with the battery running at 80 degrees C. It's true. That was the polymer. That was, again, the first generation of our batteries. And that's how we went to the world, and we proved that you can power a car, you can power a bus with a solid-state battery. In the next generation, the specifications are different, not because of Elon this time, but just because of where the market is going. And so we're trying to have a battery that works at room temperature, 25 to 40. And by the way, the 80 degrees C deployments, they have no cooling systems. So we constructed in a way that basically was highly insulated. The next one, we'll see what happens, but that's hopefully answer the question.
Great, thank you. Well, we're out of time now, so thank you all very much for all your inputs and thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.